You're listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast with Matt Tomasi and can be found at borntokickarse.com/episode 57.
Welcome to the Born to Kick Arse podcast, where you're introduced to the most fascinating people on the planet. Learn the ingredients of greatness that you can apply to your life. And now your host, Matthew Tomasi.
Gavin Sandford is an ex-soldier who now works as an anaesthetic practitioner in operating theatres. In both careers, Gavin became inspired by how people deal with their sufferings, especially the sick children he worked with in hospital. Gavin founded an initiative called I Can and I Will to bring awareness to the urgent need for people to join the bone marrow and stem cell registers by doing extreme endurance events globally and raising money for charity. In 2015, Gavin ran 45 marathons in 45 days across the entire length of Great Britain, whilst pushing a 50-kilogram oak barrel in a wheelchair. In 2016, Gavin became the first person in history to run a double back-to-back Marathon des Sables, one of the toughest ultramarathons in the world. Enjoy the interview. Gavin Sandford, welcome to the Born to Kick Arse podcast.
Good morning, Matt. How you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Now, how's your pneumonia going? You've sort of just come off the tail end of a real bad bout of pneumonia. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good, Matt, to be honest. Yeah, I was knocked sideways at the beginning part of this year with this flu that seems to be going around in the UK. And yeah, it's getting better. It's taken me 4 weeks to get better. But yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. I've still got a bit of a dry cough. Yeah. Nothing other than that.
So how bad were you? Were you bedbound like for ages or?
Yeah, I was. It's horrible. I was bedbound for 14 days.
Yep.
So yeah, it really took me out, to be honest. At a time where I really didn't need to be. I was sort of gearing up for a race and so on, and just it was a bit annoying.
Yeah, that would have thrown a spanner in the works because I believe you've just come back from the was it the Trans Gran Canaria?
I have, yeah. Awesome race. It was last weekend, and I made the decision as I'd paid for it to go for it, even though I was sort of still feeling fairly grotty. I gave myself a test run sort of 6 days before that, only for, 15K, and it absolutely knocked me on my arse, to be honest. Yep. And I decided to still go and see what I could do, but was fully prepared to pull out. And sadly, I did pull out. I got a lot further than I thought I was going to achieve. I got to the sort of just over the halfway point at 64K, yep. And decided to pull out. Not really so much because of the chest and so on that did flare up. It was more actually because of the conditioning. I had a really poor year last year with injuries and then the pneumonia, and just didn't have the conditioning. And I think my IT band and my right leg, my strong leg, just started to fire off, and it was pulling on my knee joints, and the mechanics just gave in. So yeah, I made the sensible decision to pull out. Yeah, live to fight another day.
You've done some incredible adventures and some incredible things that we'll definitely talk about. But maybe can you give us a background on your early days? I believe you got into the army early days. Can you maybe talk about that?
I was born in South Africa. My family moved over when I was a boy. So my family were all sort of forces in South Africa. My dad was special forces out there, and I guess it's in the blood. So as soon as I could, at 16 years old, I went into the British Army and served as a soldier within that. So yeah, I sort of there my formative years, I guess.
And what were you doing, like in the army? Were you Like I believe you're a medic now, but did you sort of have medic training in the army? Was that sort of when you were? Was that sort of your main role?
I was primarily, I was infantry. So I was a soldier, so I was pure base soldier.
Yeah.
But I got medical skills from that. I did combat medic, regimental medic stuff. I was lucky. I did quite a lot of sports in the military, so I got sort of supported by the military for that. So a lot of athletics and so on.
When was this? Was this like during the 80s?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was in the 80s.
Yeah.
Feels like another lifetime ago.
Yeah, it would have been. A lot of the stuff that you learnt from the army, particularly around planning and, the discipline to get on with stuff. Do you think a lot of that stuff that you're exposed to in the army has sort of translated well to a lot of the adventures that you've done, in recent years?
Yeah, I think so, mate. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, your natural sort of grounding in the army does definitely help you with things in life. It gives you the discipline to sort of be getting up when you're exhausted, for instance, as I have done with some of the challenges I've done at sort of 3:00 in the morning, and either be doing things you're good at, which primarily a lot of things I'm no good at, so sort of internet-based stuff and this, that, and the other, and I plow on through that, and then doing your day-to-day job, and then coming back and training and doing 20-hour days, and keeping that discipline is, it's a definite advantage, I think. And sort of, as you say, the logistics side of things, that definitely comes into hand with planning some of these sort of adventures that I'm doing and want to do. I don't think that I could do them if I didn't have that sort of logistical experience, setting up sort of comms through to vehicle sort of planning and food and this, that, and the other. Yeah, it's a definite advantage, I think, Matt.
And where did you serve? Was it in Northern Ireland at the time?
Yeah, I was back in the day before sort of Iraq and so on. So in my day, it was Northern Ireland, so it was tours there. So yeah, that's kind of what I did. Yeah.
And during the time you spent in the army, what sort of physical activities did you do? Was there any sort of sports that you did during your time in the army?
Yeah, I loved it. I love the army, so I kind of flourished. So if you're only good at sports, they're really, really good at sort of supporting you. So I got into triathlons, I got into orienteering, got into athletics. So those kind of areas were really well supported by the army. So sort of there's a term in the British Army when you sort of doing those, it's called a tracksuit soldier. So you kind of get supported so well that you can have more of a tracksuit life at times, and you're not involved with so much of the the standard stuff. So yeah, it was really cool actually.
Yeah, that'd be good. You got a full-time job, but they sort of really promote the fitness and the active lifestyle. That's pretty good.
Yeah, sure. It was.
If we sort of fast forwarded to like 2010, you mentioned you climbed, I think it's the highest mountain in South America, Aconcagua. Can you tell us about that and how that sort of unfolded for you?
That was an adventure, yeah. There's a really cool company called Expedition Medicine. So they sort of have global training events. So I did a jungle medics course with those guys and a polar medics course. And I saw that they had this really sort of seemingly hardcore course, and it's actually to also climb Aconcagua whilst you're learning your mountain medics course. So that sort of really appealed to me. It's one of the big 7 mountains in the world, something I'd never done before. And so, yeah, I decided to go for it and went with those guys. It was a real adventure. And
I believe it didn't really turn out that well for you. Did you almost die, did you?
Yeah, I basically... I collapsed halfway on one of basically the final push. I hadn't been taking any sort of drugs like Diamox, any sort of those drugs that most of the people were taking. I took the wrong decision also to go the sort of slow group. And prior to the whole trip, not that long before it, I'd had a rupture to L5S1, which I'd healed from, so I hadn't been going on the trip. But because I was at the slow group, I was kind of leaning more forward with the pack to take the weight off my hips and so on, and sort of waiting for them to move up the hill. And that was affecting my back. It was creating quite a lot of pain, which in turn then created problems with my breathing. And just in that kind of environment, when you're so exhausted and so on, you're pushing your limits to the max. I made that little bit of a difference. And yeah, I got halfway collapsed. So it's just with breathing and so on. I had strength in my legs, plenty, but sort of had a friend who was my tent buddy. He was a special forces guy, and he's like, "Come on, let's eat." So I was, and getting G'd up, and then joined the group again and went off and landed for collapsing, sort of 200 meters from the top. And the guys were like, "Right, so I'm going to get you up, get a chopper here." And I'm like, "No, you've got to get me to the top. You've got to get me to the top." And I had this whole sort of 10-minute conversation with him. And he was such a cool guy. He sort of started to do cognitive tests and this, that, and the other. And I passed those. He said, "Okay, let's go for it." So I managed to get to the summit and collapsed again. And I knew I was in a serious shape, so I spoke to the lead as such, the boss, and said, "Look, you've got to get me off quick, smartish. I can't really hang around, I don't think, with the group to slowly go back down." And so he got one of his main guys, and we dropped down. I had the strength and dropped down, and as that was happening, as I'm sure all the listeners know, you drop height quickly, that improves your condition dramatically. And it did, and it looked after me overnight. And I was fine. But yeah, that was an experience within an experience.
Are you the founder of a charity, I Can and I Will?
Yeah, it's an initiative. It's an initiative. I've been Army days. I've been working in operating theatres for the last sort of 20 plus years, and have specialised in quite a few sort of hardcore areas, if you will. So I've worked with some quite intense pediatric centres, and I guess it's from having a lot of experience bases in these areas and being affected by a lot of things that you see on a daily basis that things started to sort of move within me. I'm sort of within that professional capacity, my ability, I guess, to deal with these upsetting cases and things is getting not as good. My protective jacket's starting to slip. And with my sort of outside life with adventure and sports and this, that, and the other, I wanted to and started to develop the idea that I wanted to create something more of a good outside of work, doing the things I love, and how could I do it, sort of thing. And sort of 4 or 5 years ago, started that process with a friend, and eventually it kicked off, and I set up I Can and I Will, and it sees me doing sort of global events, hopefully to try and inspire people to come to the website, have a look. Hopefully they think it's cool, and then they see what's within the website. And my main focus is being a charity ambassador, and hopefully get people impassioned and on board.
Some of the adventures you've done are quite incredible. First of all, maybe we'll start off in 2015, you did 45 marathons in 45 days, pushing a 50-kilogram oak barrel in a wheelchair. How did that come about?
I was at the time working at Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham. So this hospital is the lead hospital for all incoming wounded soldiers. So I'd worked on the burns and plastics unit within the hospital, and obviously got to see a hell of a lot of really upsetting cases, being an ex-soldier myself, and so on and so on. And I wanted to raise money for wounded soldiers, veterans, and especially going to specialised rehab equipment for those guys. All patients as well would benefit from the equipment. So I wanted something symbolistic. So I developed an idea to run from John O'Groats to Land's End, and I think the standard route's about 800 miles, but I wanted to create as much exposure as possible. So I looked at the UK and thought, right, let's hit all the major cities, and the route landed up being a 1,200-mile route. Yeah. And I thought, right, okay, well, I want to run solo, make it harder. I want to carry my gear. How am I going to do it? And how am I going to do it with something symbolistic? and came up with the idea with a wheelchair and a barrel, carry something within the barrel of all my gear, and then the moniker rolling out the barrel for charity came along, and then we turned up. It was an oak barrel that we found, and I decided to create a notch within the actual top of the barrel so people could donate within the barrel, and called it Bessie the Barrel, and I just kind of off we went, sort of thing.
Now, just for listeners who aren't from the UK, whereabouts is John O'Groats and Land's End? Where are they situated?
John O'Groats and Land's End are both the very most northern part. So John O'Groats is the northern tip of the UK, and Land's End is the most southern part. It's kind of a route that many, many people will do. They'll either walk it or they'll run it, they'll cycle it, they'll skateboard it, they'll do all sorts of crazy things, and pretty much generally always for charity. So it's quite an iconic route to do. So
with the actual oak barrel, this is like a massive. Is it like an oak barrel that is used for, storing wine? Is it those sort of barrels?
It was, yeah. I needed to find the right size barrel for the wheelchair. So I got sponsored by a wheelchair company, and luckily there's a guy on the internet. Went to see him, and he had hundreds of barrels, and this one just happened to fit perfectly. It's from Portugal, I think, some oak barrel from Portugal, yeah.
And you said, you put a notch in it, but with your gear, how did you manage the logistics of your gear? Did you have like a team traveling with you on this expedition? No,
I didn't have a team at the time. No, my partner was with me. We got sponsored with Ford as well, so we had a vehicle with that, and she was by my side pretty much the most of the trip. Often I would be running with fancy dress as well to try and sort of get even more attention going through the city. So one city I'd be running through in a Zulu suit, the next one would be like a muscle lycra suit and all that kind of stuff. So there's quite a lot of equipment to be carried. So logistically, there's no way I could carry that. So I was running solo, and the day is completely solo, unsupported, and all that sort of stuff. But I had to have a vehicle for that sort of stuff, and potentially if I got hit by a truck or anything like that, there needed to be someone nearby, kind of thing.
And with the actual wheelchair, was it just a standard wheelchair, or was it sort of modified at all?
No, it's completely not standard. It was just a normal wheelchair, mate, yeah.
And like, what about the tyres? Are they like similar to bike tyres, or are they sort of like solid type tyres? What are the tyres like, or on the wheels?
No, they were, to be fair, it wasn't the greatest. It was a great wheelchair, but for that, with a 50-kilo barrel, and then you're getting people putting cash in there, it was getting heavier and heavier, and it was, on hindsight, I could have chosen better wheels and so on and so on, but no, it was completely standard. So running over UK sort of roads and tracks and stuff was a bit of a challenge, having this thing bucking and weaving around in your hands and trying to avoid trucks and things like this and cars speeding past you. And it was a challenge.
A marathon pushing a wheelchair, with a 50-kilogram oak barrel in it. What sort of times were you doing on average, to get through the day, the actual running part of it? How long did that take, navigating?
I'm a pretty good navigator, so navigation wasn't that much of a problem. The first day I did the first leg, I think in something like, 5.5 hours.
Yep.
It was a beautiful day. I was howling at the gods, and the preparation for it had been immense, and just I was so happy. The second day couldn't have been different. I'd set off. It was pitch black and remained so till midday. There's a massive storm coming through, huge trucks flying past. I spent sort of 5 hours running up this huge hill, battling against a head-on wind. It's a bad way, so I've got to get off this hill. It's so dangerous. And landed up dropping off. Bear in mind, this is in Scotland, so there's some pretty serious mountains and stuff. Dropped off the other side, sort of a 15% sort of incline, and ripped my main extensor tendon in my ankle pretty badly. It's a grade 2 tear, and plowed on and finished. And that, from then on, all the way down to the halfway point in the UK, created sort of 16 to 20-hour days because I basically just couldn't run anymore. So, yeah, that was a bit of a problem. And I had physio treatments, lots of advice from doctors saying pull out and this, that, and the other. And so, yeah, that was a bit of pain. But on the whole, after Birmingham, time started to improve. So I suppose if I hadn't been injured, an average time would be, I guess, I don't know, 5 to 6 hours.
And with the doctors telling you, to pull out, did you ever consider pulling out or sort of quitting it all halfway through this?
Absolutely, yeah. No, I considered on the fourth night. That was the second day that happened. The third day was just, I can't describe the pain. I had the wheelchair, so the dynamic of that was, and the barrel was heavy enough I could actually kind of lean on it as a support, and that landed up being sort of a 19-hour day. Yeah. Same thing to the fourth day, and that evening I just wasn't sleeping because of the pain for those previous nights, and just laid there so upset. This is my first sort of challenge. I put my heart and soul and everything into it, and thinking about the soldiers there and the money that's not going to be raised, and just a huge, horrendous conversation was going on. And it's like, look, I've got to make a decision here whether I go on and potentially really mess myself up or give up. And I was like, can I ever look at myself in the mirror? And just made a snap decision. And my partner luckily come back, and she was actually with me. I think it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. And I just got up, and she said, "What are you doing?" kind of thing. And I said, I'm starting. I've decided I'm going to risk all and go for it. So she's, you're kind of crazy. So I got my gear on and just hobbled out this place we were staying at and set off, and just accepted that it's going to take 18 to 20-hour days, and just get on with it, just take the pain, and just thought, well, it's going to heal sometime. It's just going to be horrendous, but just get on with it, and that was what I did.
So, sorry, what part did you tear? What was the main injury? Where was it?
If you sort of, if you flex your foot towards you or you push down, it's that main extended tendon. It's a medial part of your foot, basically.
Like sort of like where the arch is type thing?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I can't remember the actual medical term for it.
Where wasn't like plantar fasciitis, like extreme plantar fasciitis? Or?
No. I tore, actually. You could see it. The actual whole of my foot turned out to be like an elephant. It went bright purple, and, it was the main one where if you push down, if you're putting your pressure onto a brake pedal, it's not plantar fasciitis at the base of the foot, it's the actual extender tendon, yeah.
And was this an injury that stayed with you for the full duration of the, the whole trek from the northern part of the UK to the southern part? Was that with you the whole time? Yeah,
it stayed with me all the way. It stayed with me for about 6 months. I didn't get over it for about 6 months, but it got that much better that by the time I got to Birmingham, sort of 700 miles later, it was good enough I could run. The only problem it then knocked on to was I couldn't do sort of certain types of stretches. So I couldn't properly sort of stretch my IT band and things like this in certain ways, and that then started to affect my knee joints and so on and so on. But, all these sort of things are what you expect when you do these kind of things, aren't they? You just got to knuckle down and get on with it.
Yeah, the trouble is when you get like a major injury like that, you start to compensate, and then that compensation causes other injuries, and it's just like a knock-on effect.
Absolutely, yeah, that's exactly what happened. My kneecap got detracted. I couldn't work out my IT band properly. I hadn't the experience at that time to use physio rollers and that kind of stuff. I wasn't really aware of those, so I'd just be sort of holding my leg behind me and stretching it that sort of old-fashioned traditional way in my knowledge base. That kind of post sort of stretching routine wasn't there at the time, so my IT band just got worse and worse and worse. And before I knew it, sort of, a third of the way, my knee started to play up more and more, and I just couldn't work out what it was going on. I didn't have the knowledge. And then in Edinburgh, got an emergency call out, if you will, to can someone help us on Twitter, and a physio came and said, look, come and drop through into our places. You're running in Edinburgh, and I'll have a look at you. He's the chief guy, and he spent, I think, about 2 hours just working my IT band and made a miracle. I could actually run back to normal, well, semi-normal, and that's what happened there. And I ended up getting 2 or 3 other sort of physio things all the way down to Birmingham in that same fashion, and that kind of kept things at bay.
How did you manage to deal with the pain for that, for those 45 days? Like, was it just something that you just had to sort of suck up? Is that sort of what your mindset was like?
Yeah, basically, Matt, yeah. I made the decision. I'm a bit of a blockhead, I guess. Once I made a decision and I'm focused, there's nothing that's going to stop me. It's just, I'll carry on. And I'm not saying that's actually necessarily a good thing. It's at times has pushed me through things that, is it really, I don't know, is it beneficial for the longer term goals, sort of. So with experience, I guess with experience, it's shown with the Trans-Gran Canaria, I pulled out. It's the first thing I've ever pulled out. I've got other future things of a greater focus for me. And I guess in the last sort of 4 years, I've learned a few things. And that one thing is to, not necessarily plow on, especially if you've got other things planned. So interesting times, Matt.
Now, that's quite an incredible adventure that you did, 2015, 45 marathons, 45 days, and, you went from the most northern part of the UK to the southern while pushing a 50-kilogram oak barrel in a wheelchair. The following year, last year, 2016, what you did in 2016 sort of defies belief. For people who haven't heard of the Marathon des Sables, can you maybe tell us or tell listeners what that ultramarathon is? It's like one of the hardest or one of the toughest ultras in the world. But can you maybe tell us what it is? Sure.
It's an epic race. It's a race that was created by Patrick Boyce, who's a gentleman who recently, he's an awesome guy. He went out to the Sahara sort of 30-plus years ago, backpack on, and just, adventured. Just went out, did a massive route round there by himself, and he's like, hey, this is a cool place. I'm going to do a race. And he created it. He created the famous Marathon des Sables in the Sahara. And for me, it's just one of those iconic, epic races that if you do, you've got to do it. So it's been on my radar for years. And because of the barrel run, I had a couple of charities sort of ring me up that I wasn't affiliated with and said, look, we'd like you to sort of get on board with the MDS. Would you be interested? And I declined those charities because they weren't charities I was involved with, and I was obviously sort of still involved with the ones I was, and approached my guys and said, look, this is a race I'd love to do. Can we look at trying to get on board with this? And things started to flower. And I said, yeah. So they managed to get me a place as a sort of an entry point, and I had to find the fees. So managed to find the fees for it, and I was on, and I was going down to meet a wonderful gentleman called Steve Diedrich. He works with his company, Run Ultra, and his company contain all the UK MDS competitors, and he looks after them. And I approached him and said, hey, I'm Gavin. I'm doing the MDS this year, but I've got an idea. I'd like to do a double. At which point he sort of kind of smiled at me and said, okay, pleased to meet you, and I'll see you soon.
No, I just wanted to sort of delve into that a bit. Like, if anyone Googles Marathon des Sables, it comes up, and way it's marketed is, it's one of the toughest ultras in the world. I think it's like a 250K, give or take, like a 5 or 6 day stage race?
It's a 7-day ultra, yeah.
Where did the thought of doing a double MDS come from? How did that come about? Because that's not something that you sort of just jump straight into. The MDS in its own right is extreme, but double. When did that sort of come about in your mind?
Yeah, basically, I had a company that was looking like they were going to be a really strong sponsorship partner. The guy, as many people are, that he didn't know anything about the MDS. So I was actually traveling down to meet Steve Diedrich, and I was on the train, and I had this person saying, "Hey, look, tell me about the MDS. What's so great about it? Well, what's so tough? Why would I be sponsoring you?" And so on and so on. And I guess it's from the experiences from the Barrow Run, having done something crazy like that and running in fancy dress through London, and it's hard. A lot of people doing amazing things out there, and you've really got to push the envelope to inspire people to eventually, get them onto your website and hopefully donate and register and so on. And that got me thinking. I'm like, well, actually, is the MDS tough enough? And of course it is. It's a crazy, crazy race. It's an iconic, one of the toughest races in the world for sure. Well, that sowed the seed, and I had a couple of hours on the train to think about it, and I made the snap decision. Okay, all right, let's go for it. It's the same sort of principle that John goes to Land's End. That's 800 miles, and sort of I increased that by quite a bit. And yeah, I made a decision in my mind, and me being me, that was it. I made my mind up. I turned up at the seminar, met Steve Diedrich there, and I said, "Hey, I'm Gavin. Pleased to meet you. I'm going to do a double."
And what was his...
And once I've committed and said that, he will quite openly say that he just met a wild-eyed, red-headed guy saying this, and just took it as you would do. Yeah, you're crazy. He probably gets these kind of things regularly. And he was very polite, absolute gentleman, and we parted ways sort of thing. He was busy at the time with all the other people coming in and a natural progression sort of thing.
With the actual approach for doing the double, did you do the actual official race first, and then did you sort of just backtrack your way back? Can you maybe talk us through that?
No, it was. You can imagine. It's a crazy, crazy idea. So I had, from inception, from the train journey to setting foot on sand, I had 4 months to prepare physically, all the logistics and all the rest of it, and one of the big challenges was obviously to get Steve on board, because he's the right-hand man to Patrick Bohr. It's an iconic race. So, the founders and the organization will look after its own sort of image, and quite rightly so, all its logistics. And, they don't want some crazy person that's not up to the job coming along and doing these things, and quite rightly so. So I had to introduce all sorts of measures to get their confidence and open doors of communication and so on. So I was lucky. I had an amazing chap who is he's worked with Bear Grylls as a medic. His name is Nicholas Crombie. He's one of the lead consultant anaesthetists across the UK. He does all sorts of helicopters work, and top medic. So I introduced him, and so on and so on. My partner's top nutritionalist, so I had that support there as well. And things started to evolve quite quickly. They gained confidence in me and my team. And with that, he opened doors of communicating with Patrick Bohr, and things started to move. It was a challenge considering the timescales, yeah, for sure.
But when you did it, did you actually do the official race, or did you run to the start? I'm just trying to get my head around the actual...
Yeah, of course. Yeah, sorry. No, they're very protective of keeping the routes secret. It's their tradition. It's their ethos, and so they didn't want a conflict. So I was given a previous year's route that didn't conflict in any way race. So they didn't want me to know anything about anything of the route, because obviously you have a legion of helpers with the MDS go out and set the route out and all the rest of it and get it all marked up, ready. And I'd be there the week before, sort of thing. So I was given a previous year's route, and that's what happened. We went out the week before and did that week's route. Then I finished and then joined the incoming contingent at the airport, and we all drove out and started that year's race.
And when you did the actual first route, the week before, were you doing this solo, or how did you manage the logistics of getting your gear moved around and, nutrition and fluids and stuff like that?
Another part of the process, I was looking into, basically it's an independent and hardcore desert expedition in its own right. So I had to create within that 4 months desert risk manifestos and all sorts of stuff, tap into friends and connections and get all the right advice. Make sure I was totally set up, and I had to be prepared myself within my own rights. I wasn't expecting to get any help from the MDS, but as things transpired, they gave the name of a local guy in country. He could be a fix-it kind of guy. So he had an amazing setup there. His name is Youssef. And I flew out and did a pre-recce, got to meet him and sort of checked him out, sort of eye-to-eye kind of thing, to see if he was up for the task. We went out and explored, and I got to see his vehicle and his setup, and he just knew everyone. So I just knew instantly I was in the right hands. So a lot of the sort of headaches were taken out of my hands. I had all the connections with the 4x4 company that were ready to go, and food and this, that, and the other. But in effect, quite a lot of that, as I say, was looked after by him. So that's pretty cool. So we had a small but professional knit team as such.
Now, with the actual running that you did on the first MDS, what sort of distances were you doing? Were you doing distances equivalent to the year that it was run, that particular route? G'day guys, Matt here. This podcast is a labour of love, and all episodes are researched, scheduled, edited, created and promoted in my spare time. Typically, after an episode has been recorded, it can take another 3 hours of post-production activities to get the final cut. If I'm providing you with value and you wish to support my vision of sharing these inspirational stories to the world, you can do so at borntokickarse.com and click on the Patreon banner. Your support will help to maintain the monthly podcast running costs and enable me to outsource repetitive tasks so I can bring you even more kick-ass episodes. Once again, if you want to support me in producing this podcast, head over to borntokickarse.com and click on the Patreon banner. You can't miss it. And now back to the rest of the show. Now, with the actual running that you did on the first MDS, what sort of distances were you doing? Were you doing distances equivalent to the year that it was run, that particular route?
With the whole premise from the very get-go was that if I was going to do this, I did it to the exact guidelines to the MDS. So Youssef works and does work with the MDS. So he was kind of an adjudicator. So there's himself and Nick Cromie, who's the medic. So they acted as sort of professional adjudicators. So it was my determination from the very get-go that I would have GPRS. I'd have those guys dental me. They would cover exactly the same ethos for the race. So we had obviously spent a lot of time working out the routes and had satellite imagery, and all sorts of factors were brought into play so that I would be able to navigate myself whilst they would go ahead to the next water checkpoint, which would be within, the framework, and I would be given water in the same fashion. I'd sleep in the same fashion, so I didn't sleep with those guys. I didn't eat any of their food. I ran exactly as I did with the MDS the next week.
And what, you also carried your own food?
Yeah, absolutely. So the MDS, you run with your own food. So you run self-sufficient. So you're given water at the checkpoints. You run with your own food. You run with your own sleeping gear, any spare clothes, and any sort of emergency stuff. So you've got your applicable mandatory kit as well. Yeah. That's kind of how it all plays out.
So in that week, the first week, the first MDS that you did, what was your approach to, I guess, day-to-day running, and also your overall approach for the week? Were you trying to minimize injuries, trying to just so you could make it to the start line of the official MDS? Was that something always playing on your mind?
Yeah, no, I was literally 24 hours before we flew out to start the first week. I had British Forces TV with me. And where I lived at the time, there's a canal in front of our place. And BBC had done stuff there before. And I suggested to the guys, hey guys, why don't you just do and wrap up a little bit along running left to right canal, and we're done kind of stuff. Leading off the canal are sort of, 20-inch high slatted steps. Just as they were filming, I slipped off one of those steps, and I thought I'd fractured my ankle. So I lay there screaming in agony, and the whole situation, and like the John O'Costa Land's End, except worse, happened. And those guys sort of dropped their jaws and couldn't believe it. And I landed up having to get transport to the hospital, and they were x-raying. Luckily, I hadn't fractured it as far as they could tell, but torn all my lateral ligaments. Managed to get with Nick Crombie, who worked there, and so on, and just get advice with him and so on. And they're like, well, you shouldn't really be weight bearing for 4 weeks. Nick Crombie I was in tears at the time. He said, no, we're going to go. So he chivied me up, and we jumped in the cab and set off. So luckily I had him on board, really. He had specialized sort of ice splints for the day before we sort of set off. And it was, I landed up basically, in answer to your question, I was running injured before I even started, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I was very mindful of injuries. Yeah, I absolutely, I was already injured. So
yeah.
It was a bit of a nightmare, to be honest.
How tough was it doing the long days? This is like in the first week, you're doing many, many hours of running through extreme terrain, through the Sahara Desert. How tough was it knowing, or, on those days when, it's just you there, that you haven't actually started the official MDS, and it's just you literally running by yourself through the sand dunes. Was that, how tough was that?
It was it was a double-edged sword. Yeah, it was, I like that. Oh God, yeah. The first day is just, you've got to go and do the MDS just for the first day. You go into the sand dune area. These things are like 50 stories high, and sort of 15 k's wide. And you run into that, and when you're by yourself, it's just, my God, you can't describe it. It's just awesome. I was howling at the gods. I literally was. It's just blown away by this experience. And the navigation side of things was tricky, but I had little day-to-day sort of satellite images. I had 3 layers navigation. I had the traditional compass, a GPRS, and so on. So I felt comfortable, but it was just, it's a double-edged sword. 1 minute you're in full fear of your life. You could be on a Jebel, a mountain with all the rocks and stuff, and trying to navigate. And I knew my team were 12K the other side, so I didn't have comms. And you've got snakes, you've got all sorts. You could fall over and smash your face and knock yourself out, or break your leg. They won't be able to speak to you more often than not. And so, that was scary at times, man.
When you completed the first MDS, What was that like? Like getting, you haven't even started the official one and you've spent that previous week running the MDS yourself. What was that like getting through the first one?
It was absolutely awesome. It was stressful for the team, and I was very mindful for the team how stressful it was, because they were looking after my safety. They were aware of the things I've just mentioned, and it was awesome for me to the team could relax, and that was most important for me. And knowing that they could do that was just awesome. And then to relax myself, I guess, and see all the wonderful people coming in, the energy and having company. I knew I'm halfway here. I can actually be running with people, like the nighttime legs. That was just crazy for the first week. You're running by yourself. And because there hadn't been loads of competitors in front of you, there wasn't a trampled path there. That navigation was really stressful. And then you had all the animals in front of you. You had spiders and snakes. And, you think, am I going to get bitten here? And I'm in the middle of nowhere. My GPS is, limited as such. So I could die here. And knowing that I'd have all the competitors around, and yeah, it was such a relief, to be honest, mate. It really was,
Now, what's it like when all the other competitors have arrived, for the official MDS, and you're there and you've just done one, and, people are sort of unpacking and they're, motioning towards the start line and, maybe a couple of hours before you actually kick off. Were there many people around that knew you had just completed an MDS the week prior?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I think people had heard. Yeah, I think there had been some social media stuff put out. I didn't really want to tap into that. I didn't really have opportunity. I didn't really want to tap into it. But I wanted to treat it as it wasn't in the bag until I'd finished, the second week. Yeah. And it's just being superstitious and stuff. So I wasn't asking people. I was still focused. I was still fairly injured, and I was just really just focused on the end goal. I didn't think I had it in the bag by any way, even though I'd come through the toughest part for me. The first week was definitely the toughest. I felt like I was in a bit of a dream for quite a lot of the time, and just kept focused really in a little bubble.
So do you have any tips to stay focused? Like, this is such an incredible, it's the only, I don't know if anyone else has ever done this, but you're the first person ever to do the double back-to-back MDS. How do you sort of stay focused over such a long period of time in such harsh terrain? Is there any sort of tips that you have that you use to stay to keep your focus?
Yeah, I can't zone out. I don't listen to music. I try and sort of tap into nature. I try and appreciate, even though I'm suffering like hell, I try and sort of pick aspects of nature and just really appreciate everything, whether it's just, a goat that I'm running past and or even blades of grass, just anything, just to try and take your mind off and just listen to my breathing and try and be mindful. And if I'm really suffering, I kind of look at the horizon and pick points on the horizon and said, right, I'm going to get to that point before I walk and have a rest. So I'm going to get to that point before I can have some water and so on and so on. So I sort of set goals to try and make what seems too unachievable achievable. Yeah. So, I mentally build myself up when I wake up in the morning and I start getting zoned into it and just trying to compartmentalize the day's challenge and then break it down and sort of, you do your homework, the day before, and you look at your next day's route and said, right, here are key objectives. And then within that, I'm going to try and work to this. And just go with it with that sort of mindset. So
do you try and not get too overawed by the entire ordeal? Like a double MDS, if you're trying to think about it, your mind's just going to collapse. Do you try not to think of that's, such a big task ahead of you? Is that you just break it down and just try and, focus on, the next step,
Yeah, I like that pressure, that internal sort of pressure, I guess. I don't feel overawed by that.
Yep.
It is overawing, but then you just got to just do what I was saying. You just got to compartmentalize everything and just try and enjoy the process. And when you're suffering, just realize it's going to end. These things hurt, and you just got to tough it out. You can get overawed. There are a number of times there where I'm going over Sables, or you can die quite easily doing this sort of stuff. And yes, I was the first person to do this, and I was having conversations with Steve Diedrich going over certain types of terrain, and I'm like, mate, don't let anyone ever do this, because really you need, a much, much bigger team. You need 3 vehicles instead of the one I had. You need one that's got eyes on you, one that's potentially with you, and one the other side kind of thing. And you need proper sort of bigger, more multiple layers of communication and so on and so on. And it's sort of that kind of thing. Yep. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Was there a moment on the double MDS that you knew that you almost had it in the bag? Was there a moment that you realised it might have been a day out from finishing, or was there a particular moment that you sort of knew that you were going to make it?
I guess, I suppose, it was the start of a long day when I just set off, and I was feeling okay. I guess I've got to get the long day over now. And then you've got a rest day after that traditionally, and then you've got a marathon stage, and then you've got the charity stage. That's how it sort of works out with the MDS. So I felt reasonably good, and I thought, as long as I don't injure myself, I felt then that I'm sort of 2/3 of the way through the whole double. I'm going to make it, kind of thing. So yeah, that for me, I suppose, was the point.
Now, what sort of motivates you, to do this stuff? Obviously you got your charities. Is it really just to help all the wounded soldiers, and is that sort of your motivation to do these things?
I love the physical aspects, the logistical aspects, all the aspects that come into play for when you're doing these kind of things. I love the training, the behind-scenes training, the pressures that are involved with that as well. I like that lifestyle of getting out and training and doing hard training sessions in cool areas. That sort of adventure training kind of aspect is, part and parcel of who I am. And I like that kind of, I suppose it's quite high-level pressure on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, you're right. Sort of the overriding factor is I have seen so many things in my life, I guess, that for me, my major focus is to be as good a charity ambassador as I can be, and to try and get people sort of inspired to look at what's going on with my charity focuses, and hopefully get on board. They're really cool charities I support. My focus is really now to push people to join the bone marrow and stem cell UK and worldwide. If you are a person that would willingly accept, as we all would, a donor because you're suffering with cancer, or someone in your family or someone you care for is suffering with cancer, then I think we're all duty bound to kind of look at this and become donors ourselves. It's an easy process. You can register, paperwork comes through, you give a mouth swab, off it goes. You're on the register then, and if you're lucky, you get actually chosen out of, in the UK, it's 1 in 1,200 people. You go and give some blood, stem cells are taken away, and they're used to save, for instance, a child that's battling with some blood cancer, like leukemia. And, the feel good for that is awesome. It's absolutely awesome. And I'm willing to put myself out there and potentially die happily, really, to be honest, to try and get people on board. And I think that simple, selfless act of doing that for people is such a feel-good factor. You're not giving donations, as is the usual case with charities. You're actually, you can go away and do this, and you can finish the registration process. And the feel-good, I think I'd hope for everyone, is awesome.
You've got some other incredible adventures that you're working towards. later on this year. Can you maybe talk us through that?
I pulled out the Trans-Gran Canaria just because I wasn't fit really and so on, and I could have ploughed through but decided not to because I've got the Bolton round, which is in 100 days from today actually. And that's an iconic race that's held in the UK. So for listeners who aren't aware of it, it's in the Lake District. So it's one of the most spectacular places in the UK. And it's a race that was done by a chap called Bob Graham. And for his 42nd birthday, he decided he'd run 42 summits within 24 hours around the Lake District. And it's become another iconic race like the MDS. And that's what it's all about. You've got 24 hours to run this route, and it's a 66-mile route that sees you climbing over the equivalent distance of Mount Everest and down. So it's a massive, massive challenge. That's it's quite well known in the UK. I'm not sure if your listeners will know about it if they're not in the UK. But yeah, so that's in 3 months' time. And then I've got a challenge in Dubai, and then I've got a bigger challenge the latter part of next year, Matt.
Tell us about the one in Dubai. It's this is both challenges. So the one in August that you're planning to do, the Sea to Space vertical climb. What is that?
Yeah, that's kind of evolved from the climb in Aconcagua. It cost me an arm and a leg, and the logistics for something like that, it's massive. And any climbers out there will know that the pinnacle of many climbers' careers is to do the Big Seven. And there's just no way with sponsorship and that sort of stuff that for me, that's going to happen. And I'd love to in the future make that happen. So it's evolved into, well, I'd like to do some sort of stepping challenge for charity. And it's evolved without going into it. So it's now essentially an idea I've come up with where, imagine if you're in the deepest part of the ocean, the Mariana Trench, and you're going to walk in vertical distance out through the sea, and then to eventually where Earth's atmosphere meets space. So that's the Kármán line. So the vertical distance, as you imagine, is 75 miles. So I'm going to use the inner stairwell of the Burj Khalifa, and that's the tallest building in the world in Dubai, and that's half a mile high, and I'm going to run that 150 times, which is the equivalent distance of 75 miles.
How are you going to approach your training for that? Are you just going to hit the step machine, the Stairmaster? How are you going to approach that?
Yeah, I've got a company called Core Health and Fitness, awesome company, and they've sponsored me a Stairmaster gauntlet machine. It's the machine I used for the barrel run. So it's a hardcore machine. It's something that without I wouldn't be able to do the challenge really. So those guys sponsored me this awesome bit of kit. I'll use that. But the training I'm generally doing now to get out for the Bob Graham round will see me every sort of weekend hitting the mountains, and that sort of training in itself is also going to be beneficial as well, for sure.
So with the Burj Khalifa, you're going to do that 150 times, like climb it and then descend it 150 times?
Yeah, no, the idea, I'm not going to descend it. It's about going up from A to B. So it's a vertical climb.
Okay.
So it's going to be running up and then getting the lift down.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Yeah, that's going to be full on. So after the Sea to Space vertical climb that you're planning on doing later this year, you've also got another incredible adventure that you're planning as well after that. What one's that?
I'm calling it the Vikings run. I've done a bit of research into the territories of where the Vikings sort of pervaded as such. So my intention is to run from the most northern point of Europe, and that's a tiny island just north of Svalbard. So I'm going to run over the tiny island, run over the islands of Svalbard, what makes up Svalbard, then get across to Nordkapp, which is the most northern tip of mainland Europe, which is in North Norway, run through the whole of Europe, basically. So it's down through Norway, down through France, over the mountain ranges there, which will be in winter, down through Spain, head towards Gibraltar, down into Africa, over the Atlas mountain ranges, down to the Sahara, and it's my intention to run the Marathon des Sables as a finisher.
Jeez. So you're going to run the length of Europe to the start of the MDS?
Yeah. I've worked out it's over 4,000 miles, so we'll just round up to 4,000 miles. So it's going to be 150 days with over a marathon a day, so a marathon a day.
How do you sort of internalise when people say you can't do stuff? The sea to space vertical climb, or the Vikings run that you're planning on doing, or stuff that you've already accomplished. When people sort of say to you, "No, you can't do it; it's impossible," how do you react to that? Do you take that on board, or do you just refuse to believe that there are limits?
Absolutely, it's not in my vocabulary. I'm not going to take that on board. You can't let that kind of mindset sort of tap into you, I guess. I mean, as soon as that seed is sown, I think that could be quite a destructive thing. So I use that. If I get that kind of feedback, which I have had before, I've had it from a sponsor before, saying that they didn't think I had the mental aptitude to achieve the double MDS, and thought I would die and I wasn't prepared for it, and so on and so on and so on. And I just turn that into fuel for fire. I quite enjoy that sort of thing. So any sort of feedback or any negative criticisms like that, I can take it on the chin. I'll be quite cordial about it, but I will I'll box it up, pop it into my heart, and I'll use that as fire. And that's not a bother to me at all.
How do you go about developing, or even for listeners, what sort of tips do you have in regards to developing mental toughness in life,
I guess it's quite often, I think it's from your experiences, as just from maybe even from when you're really young. My childhood, I guess, wasn't normal. In Africa, all my family were pretty hardcore. My uncle was Healer Scout, my dad, Special Forces. There's photos of me with my other cousins stood there semi-naked with military berets and webbing hanging off us, Uzi machine gun in one hand and a bottle of beer in the other, kind of thing. And that's how we were, and I think life's experiences tend to mold you for sure. And yeah, I guess I went into the army as a boy. I went in, I was 16 and went through sort of tours of duty, that kind of stuff. So I think you often, if you're exposed to these things, your makeup just develops.
Yeah.
And then obviously the military and then the hospital aspects develops sort of mental toughness and so on. And if you're of a mindset, I guess, in answer to wanting to do things that are beyond your perceived abilities, then no, just break things down, believe in yourself. So, I can and I will. The actual moniker was actually given to me, I suppose, if you will. Sorry for the background noise, Matt. There's a vehicle coming past.
That's all good.
So I'll start again. Sorry. So yeah, I can and I will was from a child I was working with in pediatrics at the cancer unit, and it's an end-of-life situation, so it's really upsetting. And I got to know this child. We'll call her Molly, if you will. And I was asking her to do something that would cause her pain, is to have a cannula put into one of her veins. And she said, yeah, I can and I will. She's so cheery, this beautiful child. And, you've got to have that ethos. If a child can sort of come across like that through all the suffering, this child had suffered, believe me, she had medical notes as knee-high kind of thing, then you've got to believe in yourself. You've got to believe in your goals. You've got to believe that you can do it, and just go for it, and just believe. Never, ever, ever, ever give up, and just go. Just go for it. Surround yourself with good energy. Surround yourself with the team. It's the people around you as well that are a huge factor, without the team, for these challenges, I wouldn't have been able to do this as well. They're just as intrinsic, I think, as So yeah, I think there are a number of factors, Matt, that you've got to take into account, and you've got to believe in yourself, and so on and so on.
What about, is there a moment that's your proudest moment that you can, is there a moment that that you're really proud of in your, on the adventures that you've done to date, or even in life? Is there a moment that really stands out for you as being your proudest?
I was proud for me and my team, the MDS, definitely. Yeah. I think that's one of the highlights. I remember finishing it. We've got a half an hour mini doc to be released soon, and hopefully that comes across. And it's just looking back now, having been asked that question, I think just the finishing of the first week, the feel good, the relief, and I was so proud of my team. They've been through a hell of a lot, a lot of stress and strain to get me there. I'm just a guy that's just plodding along, and they were the ones that were worrying and going through really high levels of stress, and I was so proud of those guys. And for me, that's a highlight, really.
Now, just on advice, if you could pick up a phone right now and make a phone call to the 20-year-old Gavin Sandford and give him some advice, what would you tell him?
Wow. I've touched upon it. Yeah, just if you are of a mindset, you've got a goal, believe in yourself. Don't let negative energies from external sources, which will happen, affect you. If you have these negative experiences, turn them on the head as best you can and make them into a positive experience. Just really believe and focus on all your goals. You have to just believe in yourself. You're going to hit hurdles. I've been really unlucky with injuries, with the challenges, and just take it on the chin. Just believe on yourself. Believe in the people that you're surrounded with, and surround yourself with positive energies. Enjoy the journey as well. I think I've become more mindful recently with my aspects of training, and there's so much sort of head down and marching on, sort of soldier-like. I'm sort of looking at more and more and thinking, no, I've got to enjoy the journey as much as the actual event. Just try and believe in yourself and enjoy yourself, and go for it.
And whereabouts can people find you online, and on Facebook and wherever your social media accounts? Whereabouts can people, follow your progress and reach out and say hi?
Yeah, sure. You can follow my progress on all my social media platforms on my website. So my website is icanandiwill.co.uk.
Well, I'll put that link in the show notes. Yeah, it's an incredible thing that you've done, and with the charity and these adventures that you've done, it's quite incredible.
Thank you.
Super inspirational.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that.
But good luck with your training, and keep in touch, and good luck with the Sea to Space and the Vikings run coming up.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me on your podcast. It's an awesome podcast. I've been really listening to a lot of the stuff since I've got to know you guys, and thank you. Thank you to all your listeners as well.
You've just been listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast at borntoKickArse.com. If you liked what you heard and want more, please subscribe on iTunes. Give a 5-star rating and a Kick Arse review. This really helps to boost our presence and continues to allow us to introduce you to the most fascinating people on the planet. Welcome aboard, and catch you next time.